So good afternoon, my name's Mel Price and I am a support worker for Hampshire SENDIASS. Today we're going to be talking about transitions and in particular primary school to secondary school, but there is a lot of information in here that will be suitable for most transitions. In this workshop we will consider preparing for transition, how schools in settings should plan for transitions, and how to make a transition plan. And we'll also cover some frequently asked questions that we get asked on triage. So firstly, I'm going to look at requesting your placement. So this looks slightly different for children with SEN and for children with EHCPs. So I'm going to start with the children with SEN. So you would have to follow the normal Hampshire admissions process, and you would start this by researching schools that you feel are appropriate for your child. So you may want to visit open evenings and speak to the school SENCO just to get an idea of whether you feel the school can meet the child's needs. When you have a clear idea of the school you would like, you can then put in your application through the Hampshire admissions team. September 2024 dates haven't been announced yet for this, but to give you a rough idea, the deadlines for 2023 were the 31st of October for the deadline for the admissions, and parents were notified on the 1st of March of their placement allocated. As I said, they're probably not going to be definite dates, but they're a rough guide of what you're working towards. So if you have an EHCP, you should expect the local authority to request your preference of secondary school at the end of year 5, beginning of year 6 at the very latest, because all the school places must be named in the EHC plan by the 15th of February latest, and this is a legal deadline that they have to follow. So you would follow the same sort of like structure of research in the schools as you would if it, as I spoke about just briefly. So you'd have a look round, talk to the school SENCOs, try and get an idea of what school would meet your child's needs. So then the next step would be for the local authority to hold an annual review, and this would be held in the autumn term. And again, that's held in the autumn term so that enable the new school to be named before the 15th of February. The annual review will run as a normal annual review would, but also within that you might want to consider if there are any transition provisions that need to be added to support your child. The annual review should run like a normal annual review, so which is where the LA reviews the plan and then the LA sends the plan with proposed amendments to the parent, and section I will be left blank. The parent will then have at least 15 days to make their representations and ask for amendments. So if there's anything you're not happy with, or you feel that there's something that's been missed from a report and needs to be added in, that's the point where you can do it. The plan is then finalised, naming the secondary placement. So when you get that plan after that autumn annual review, in the placement section, it will state the school that they're currently at. So for example, Hart Plain Junior School, a finish date of July 2023. And then underneath it will have the secondary placement named. So for example, the Cow Plain School, and then start date September 2023. So the current school or setting should share information with the new schools as soon as possible with regards to preparation for transition. This can include pupil profiles, EHCPs, attendance and behaviour data, and anything else that is relevant to you or the child. So it's also when you're preparing, so it's like how should schools and settings prepare? So they can provide all that information to the other schools, but it's really important at this stage, at the beginning of that transition and preparation, that the child's voice is heard. It would be really helpful for the new school to be aware of how the child is feeling and if they have any worries or concerns with all the transition coming up, because these can then be addressed with when making the transition plan and hopefully ease those concerns for the child. Planning, preparation, oh, forgot the right way, sorry, I think I'm going the wrong way there. There we go. So how will your child be prepared for their change of school and their setting? So there's several different things that could be put in place and can be considered when you're just starting that transition plan. So transition visits are planned within the school, but commonly have a whole school year group. But for children with SEN needs, they may need individual or small groups visits, and some may even need to visit the school when it's empty, just to be able to have a view of looking around and getting an idea of where everything is they need to find. It might also be useful for the children to have photos to help familiarise themselves with the building, and it will also give them a good thing that they can look at over the summer to keep their minds in order, and just to know what they're expecting. They can also have social stories and things like that as well. What does your child need? Who does your child need to know? So I think that's an important one to consider. So who in September will they first come into contact? Who are they going to meet on that first day? And if they have difficulties on that first day, who can they go to? So maybe having photographs of those members of staff, so they know exactly who they're looking for, because sometimes it's difficult, isn't it, with just a name. So also need to consider who does the parent and carers need to know. Who do you need to make contact with if you've got concerns? Because obviously you've got the reception staff, but if you need to talk to someone that first week in September or in preparation, who do you make that contact to? So making a transition plan. So with regards to transition, communication is going to be key to build up the positive relationships with the new school. And it's going to be really beneficial to help your child or young person when they're moving in transition. A transition plan can be a really useful way to do this. A transition plan is a way of making sure everyone involved with the transition is working together. It is also really useful as you can record who is responsible for each element of the plan. So some of the things that you might want to consider are very similar to the slide we spoke about before. So how many transition visits are needed and how they're going to look? Are they going to be a one-to-one, in a group visit or after school visit? What does my child need visually to help them? For example, do they need social stories, photos, personal passports, or anything like that? And again, who does my child need to know? And if my child has a problem, then who do they go to? Concerns. If you are feeling concerned about a future transition, the best thing to do is to talk to your child's current school and see if you can arrange a meeting to discuss your concerns and to identify any planning support that's available that hasn't already been used. Another thing is to have another meeting with the people who you've had that transition plan created with as well, to see if there are any tweaks that you need to be made to that transition plan. If you have a meeting coming up with a school and you need some support to prepare for it, we are more than happy to help you do that, and you can call through to our triage service. So some of the questions that I work on triage as well as support work. So I've picked out the 3 most common questions that we get asked. And the first one I've got is, I've had a transfer review and it's not named the school I want for my child. So if you have had a school named in the EHCP that you're unhappy with, you have the right to appeal this placement. And that's something that we can explain through more on the triage service if you want to get in contact with us. We would also always recommend talking to the named school to see if they can ease your concerns and make a plan to move forward. The second question is, do I still have to take part in transition to the school that's named? So if you're appealing a placement, then we would still recommend taking part in the transition to the named school, as there's no guarantee the placement will change at tribunal. And I think it's really important to try and do that transition to make sure that if your school choice isn't named at tribunal, then your child's got a fairly steady transition into the school placement and it's not going to be a shock in September. The third and final question we've got is, can I request an EHCP for secondary school if they don't have one at primary school? So this is something that we get asked a lot, because parents do worry about how their children are going to cope in secondary school. But EHCP assessments are completed on the child's needs as they stand now. EHCPs will not be issued on what might happen in the future. If your child is coping well in primary school with SEN support, we would recommend a careful transition plan to be completed to make sure that the SEN support continues in secondary school. If for any reason when they get into secondary school, you feel that that SEN support is not enough and they need more, then we would recommend talking to the new school Senko and having an open, honest conversation and see if there's any other SEN support that can be put in place. And then that might be the point to talk and have that discussion about the EHC assessment with them. Thank you for your time today. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. And on the screen, we've got all of our contact details. Thank you.